Hi everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you this bracelet that's a version of 2-drop peyote, but it's a little bit different because we're going to be using different size beads. For this bracelet, it also has an interesting clasp. The clasp is a loop here, and what we do then is we put a bead through the pocket, and then it gets hooked on the other side. So it gives it a nice little unusual clasp. So we'll show you how to do both. I'm going to do the 2-drop and then I'll show you how to do the clasp as well. For this bracelet we're going to be using a number of materials because we are using a variety of seed beads. For thread I'm using Wildfire 0.006 in green because I'm using kind of bluish tones. I'm going to be using my thread burner to thread to get my thread off my spool, as well as to burn down some knots when we have to add thread. I have a size 10 English beading needle. And then in addition to that, I have my beads. I have one bead for my clasp or closure, which I'm just using an 8mm glass pewter colored bead. I have 3mm Czech glass in a Sapphire AB color, and then I have 3 tubes of seed beads. The 3 tubes of seed beads I have are, one is my 11-0 seed bead, and I'm using that in the Galvanized silver. I have 2 tubes of 4mm Miyuki cubes, and I'm using matte transparent dark topaz AB and matte gunmetal. So these are going to be all of our beads that we need to do the whole bracelet, including the clasp. So we'll get ready to start. So to start out our project, I've laid these beads out into piles because we are using all the beads at once. We're going to start on this end here, the end that's going to have the little loop and cording, and we're going to add that after the fact. So we're going to start with our first row of our peyote. I have onto my thread a stop bead. If you're not sure how to put on a stop bead, you can check out our other videos. Basically, a stop bead is a bead that is not in our project that we're going to run the thread through 2 times, and that's going to stop our beads from falling off the end. So to start out, we're going to start out with a pattern of our gunmetal bead, 2 11-0s, my topaz bead, 2 more 11-0s, my gunmetal bead again, and 2 more 11-0s. That's going to be my first row of peyote. And actually, if you know anything about peyote already, or if you don't, you may want to stop and check out our other peyote video, learn peyote first, and then come back and do this. Basically, this is my first row of peyote, which is actually going to be the 2 starter rows. After I'm done this first row, I'm going to put on 2 more 11-0 seed beads, and these are basically going to fill in the little hole next to my cubes. I'm bringing my needle back towards the stop bead, going through the cube, and then those 4 seed beads will sit 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. They're going to sit right like that. Next, I'm going to put 2 more seed beads on, and I'm going through the next cube. Two more seed beads go on, and I go through the last cube. And that's going to get me those little blocks here, and that's going to get me my first 3 rows of peyote. My first one was 2, and then that last one was 3. For my 4th row of peyote, all I'm doing is using my seed beads. So I'm going to use my 2 seed beads, and I'm going through the last beads that I put on. So I put 2 seed beads on, and then I'm coming back away from the tail with my needle coming towards me, and I'm going through the seed beads that I just put on, always in groups of 2. 2 go on, and I'm going through 2. Again, 2 on, and then through 2. And that's going to get me that next row. So you can see those 2 seed beads are just sitting right on top. For the next row, I get to add some more cubes and some more beads that are going to go right into the cubes that are, or the seed beads that are sticking up. So I'm going to start my pattern by adding 1 of my Czech glass beads, going through the last 2 seed beads I put on. Next goes another one of my gunmetal cubes through the next 2 seed beads. And then next goes one of my topaz beads, and through the next 2 seed beads. So I'm always putting on groups of 3 basically. I'm putting either 3 groups of 2 or 3 of my cube / Czech glass mix. When I come back now, I'm going to come back just like I did for the start, where I'm just adding 2 seed beads in between each of my cubes or Czech glass bead. So my 2 seed beads go on, and then I sew through the last row of beads that I added. After I come out here, I'm going to do just like I did when I did my row of just seed beads. So I put 2 seed beads on, and I go back through the last 2 that I added. 2 more go on, and I'm going back through those next 2. 2 more on, and back through the 2 on this side. So for peyote, you're constantly zigzagging your needle from one side to the other, sewing back and forth. When I do this next row, I'm going to continue my pattern basically. Coming back this way, you can see a topaz bead goes next, and that's going to get pulled. And that's going to finish that topaz row off to the side. Then one of my gunmetal beads goes on through those next 2 seed beads. And after the gunmetal bead comes one of my Czech glass beads. And that goes on. And you can use 4mm Czech glass for this as well. It'll work. The 3, I just like the size difference and the kind of the way that it looks a little bit with it. When I'm doing my next row, I'm repeating, putting on my seed beads, and going back through my last beads that I added. And when you're doing this, you're just going to kind of keep an eye on your pattern. Make sure whatever pattern you pick, that you want that to be consistent the whole way throughout. There's nothing worse than getting done the bracelet and realizing that you've missed one bead or that you have one off color on it. It also gives a nice artistic flair, but sometimes it can be a little bit disheartening. So I'm continuing on here, putting my seed beads on my next row, and then I'm going to get ready to do my Czech glass beads again. So for my pattern, I'm going to have my 3mm beads running down the center, just like this one of my cube colors. So I'm going to repeat that steel cube, that gunmetal cube right here, and that's going to be the next one in your pattern. And then you can look and you can say, okay, the next thing in my pattern is my Czech glass bead is going to be in line, and then after that is another one of my steel beads. You're going to continue this alternating pattern the whole way along the bracelet. So I've added all my seed beads for the last 2 rows, and I'm going to get ready to do my pattern again. And your next pattern is going to be that gunmetal color, and that's going to be the end of that row, followed by your Czech, followed by another one of the slate colors, that gunmetal-y color. The next rotation, I will add the topaz-y color back in, and that'll be on this side of the gunmetal. So I'm going to continue adding my seed beads and building my bracelet. So I've added my seed beads in, and here's where I bring that topaz color back in. I'm going to do my topaz color, and then I do my gunmetal color, and then I'm going to do my Czech glass. And those are going to be my 3 in that rotation. And that completes my first 3 diagonal stitches. I'm going to have 1 more of my Czech glass to add, and then I'm going to keep going to get my little bracelet pattern. So I'm continuing with my pattern here and just framing out my Czech glass beads. And I'm continuing adding the seed beads as well, and we're just going right along again, adding our seed beads just as our double drop or our 2-drop peyote, adding 2 at once, and that fits really nicely in between those cubes and the 3mm Czech glass. You can use 4mm Czech glass with this too. You could also use 3mm cubes with the 3mm check glass. Again, like I said, I just like the size variation in the way that it looks on the bracelet, and I'm using the 2 different sizes. And I'm continuing building my whole bracelet here, going right down the line, doing my rows of seed beads, and then my rows of cubes and check glass. And one thing to keep in mind is I have this diagonal pattern that I'm going and that I'm doing. You can really do any pattern. You could do rows if you'd rather do that, or blocks of color. So don't limit yourself to these patterns. You could also do the whole thing with check glass or the whole thing with cubes. You don't need to use the variety of different shapes. I just like the look of that. And you're just going to keep going, building your bracelet. So I'm just showing my progression on the bracelet here, and just that we're continuing to build. You do want this bracelet, I'm going to measure it against my other bracelet. The extra little end here that we're doing to do our little loop inside of, this is going to add about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, depending on how big you want to make it. So when you're making your bracelet, you want to keep that in mind. So I only have about 1 inch more to go, where I'll continue sewing and putting my beads in place, just continuing with the peyote and continuing with my pattern. And then we'll get ready to do our little closure clasp. So now that I'm done the length of my bracelet, I'm going to get ready to do my little turnover loop here. It's almost like a little pouch, and that's what the clasp is going to slide into here, and then link on the other side to close. So right now we're going to making that little pouch. I'm going to make that little pouch out of my 11-0 seed beads. So we're going to continue with our 2-drop peyote just like we've been doing. I finished my row to get my length that I need. And then what I'm going to do is put my 2 seed beads on, and just like I've been doing, I'm going to add 2 seed beads and go through 2 seed beads. After this one here, normally I would add my cubes and my check glass. What I'm going to do is just continue to add seed beads in a 2-drop peyote form. And I'm going to do this for a large number of rows, because I need that loop big enough that it can fit my 8mm round bead that I'm using for my closure through it, and through it comfortably. So you're just going to continue doing the 2-drop peyote, but this time, instead of adding your cubes and check glass, just do it with just the 11-0s, and that's going to get you that pattern then that we're going to use to fold over to get our clasp. So one thing that I did on my example here as I'm building is I put a little bit of my check glass on the end here. I actually am going to switch that for the example that I'm doing, and I'm going to sit it so you can see it and so that it sits on the top. So I've been building here my rows of peyote. This is actually going to be the bottom. So once I get to the point that I'm ready to start folding over and connecting, that's when I'm going to get ready to add some of those check glass beads. So I'm getting to the point now that my simple 2-drop peyote strip here is getting big enough that it can almost fit my 8mm round bead through it comfortably. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of my check glass in. And this is just going to be a repeat of what you have been doing the whole length of the bracelet. I'm going to put 2 of my seed beads on. And then when I get to the middle here, I'm going to add 1 of my check glass beads. And then I'm going to add 2 more of my seed beads and complete my row. So what's going to happen then is when I fold this over, this is going to lay right on the front, and you'll be able to see a little bit of a design with the check glass. You can do this, you don't have to. It's kind of up to you. And then what I'm going to do is add more check glass as I go up the rows here. I'm going to add more. So I have 2 more seed beads on. And then I'm going to add my check glass right next to it, and another check glass bead. You're basically just going to fill in gaps then with your seed beads. And I'm going to bring my seed beads back along the line and fill in here. You can decide what pattern you want. If you want it to look like something, if you want it to just be plain, that's up to you. You could even do just one bead or put a completely different bead in. You're just going to continue sewing your 2-drop until you get whatever pattern that you want. And as I'm doing this then, when I come back down the line, I'll add another piece of my Czech glass bead into it to create a little design. And then when I come up, I'll add a little bit more Czech glass over here to kind of do a little zigzag design. And that's going to sit right on top then of my piece. And I'm going to get ready to do the last couple rows of my 2-drop peyote, and then I'm going to show you how I seam that together here at the base of the start of it. So I'm getting ready to do one more row of my 2-drop peyote so I can connect this. You want to make sure whenever you're connecting peyote in a round like that, you want to make sure that it lines up uneven, because what I'm going to end up doing is actually stitching the rows together. So to do that, I'm going to make sure that my peyote is ending up uneven. So I'm doing one more row, and then I'm going to get ready to stitch it together. And then we'll turn around after this and do our little bead and loop on the other side. So I have my end here. I'm going to be folding it over and basically connecting it on this side to the start of my peyote. What I want to do, like I said, is connect it on an odd count. So I want to make sure that I'm getting ready to connect it. When I connect it, I'm going to connect it to the beads that are below. So my needle and thread is going to go to the bottom section of my peyote here. And what that's going to do then is it's going to seam it together. I'm going to pull, and that's going to get that ready to go. And I'm going to work at it basically from front to back. And there's some other videos that we have that show how to connect the peyote really well too. And that's going to be on our video for toggles. If you look at our seed bead video, you can see this really well as well. And I'm going to seam along, so I have that one there. And then I go on to the next and add. And then I'm going up to my next section that I need to add as well. You can kind of see right along the line here now where I'm sewing. And I'm sewing right along. And that's going to get me my pattern that I need. And it's getting sewn right along that strip here. It's a little hard to see with the shiny silver, but what that's doing is connecting the one side to the other side. And then I'm going to come back and basically reinforce it by re-sewing it again. And that's going to create that loop to hold together. So I'm going to come back here and just zigzag back through everything that I just sewed together. Once I zigzag back through all of these beads here, and sometimes you need to take your needle from one side the whole way through into the other side, because it's hard when you don't have just a strip that you're attaching. When you're attaching it to something else that's already here, it's a little bit difficult to see and work with. So I'm actually taking my needle completely through to the other side, and that's going to make it easier for me then to pick up on this side and to work with. And seaming this together. If you want to, you can decorate where you seam it together. You can decorate that with some more of your Czech glass beads or your cubes and just embellish it a little bit. And you're just sewing back and forth, linking those together. So now that I've got the first side all finished up, I'm going to do my side here that has my loop and my bead. So for that, I've attached extra thread onto my end and taken off my stop bead. Then what I'm going to do is decorate my loop a little bit by putting on one of my Czech glass beads and then a number of seed beads. The number of seed beads that you're going to put on is enough to go around your 8mm bead comfortably, because your 8mm bead is going to sit in there in that loop. When you're looking here, this sits right in that loop. So you want to make sure that that sits comfortably. Once you have that, you're going to go back through the Czech glass bead and back the whole last line of beads. So that's going to be your last cubes as well as your last row of seed beads. So you're taking the needle from one whole side of your project to the other side. When you pull tight, you're going to get your nice loop that your 8mm bead can sit on. On this side here, we're going to make a rather long tail here with our beads, and then we're going to put on our little glass bead here. So I'm going to add a bunch more of my seed beads. And I do want this to be comfortable, as far as a comfortable length, that it's going to go through the loop end here and be fine to pull, and when you're sitting it on, that it doesn't sit funny or that it's not pulled too tight. This one here is actually a bit short, so I'm going to make this one on the new one a little bit longer. This one works, but it just doesn't sit as comfortably on the wrist. It pulls a little bit. So this length of this piece before your clasp or your bead is going to be pretty long. So I'm going to add lots of seed beads. And depending on the size that you're looking, it's going to be probably 1 inch to 1.5 inches worth of beads. I'm going to put my bead on, and then I'm going to make sure, just taking my needle through, that it's going to sit comfortably through my loop. You're going to pull it through your loop there, pull tight, and make sure that it can sit comfortably on this side, which I can tell already that it will. I'm going to go back through my loop here so I can finish off my end. And put the bead back through there. And now to secure the bead in place, I'm going to use another one of my Czech glass beads. I'm going to use a seed bead. I'm going to run my thread then back through my Czech glass bead, back through my glass round, and back through all my seed beads, and pull nice and tight. I'm going to then reinforce the project by going back through my loop as well. So I'm going to take my thread and needle back through all these seed beads, back through the last, back through the loop, come up and go one more time through it. So I've gotten my loop done. I'm going back through and taking my thread through. And all I'm going to do is take it simply over to the other side then. So I've gone the whole way through the loop both times, and I've gone back through the bar both times. I'm going to take it over here, and then I'm just going to tie it off, and we're going to have that done then. So I'm tied off, and all I need to do now is burn. And you can wear this two-sided because we have the little crystals on one side, or you can wear it all on silver on the other side. The bead's just going to go through the loop, and then it's going to attach here on the side, and you're going to wear your bracelet. So it's a fun little bracelet to wear. It's a nice one to make that you have the little loop there. It's a little bit added extra look. And you can make this out of a bunch of different materials, so don't limit yourself to these cubes and Czech glass. Again, like I said, you can make it and look at different stuff as well. And it looks really nice on the wrist too, that it's just a nice simple looking bracelet. If you get a chance, check out the rest of our YouTube videos. Also follow us on Facebook and go to our website, PotomacBeads.com. Check out our locations page, and we would love to see you in one of our stores. You can also, if you need any materials, check us out at thebeadco.com. Thanks a lot for watching.